For those of you who haven't had the opportunity to meet, which is quite a few of you, I just want to let you know my name is Kim Novak. I have the honor of serving on the programming board for the conference, and after 16 years of working in higher education, have a few years ago embarked on a independent consulting business, and am based in Montgomery, Texas, which is only known for one thing, and that would be the home of the Texas flag. All 485 people there celebrate it on a regular basis. So people keep asking me, where are you based out of? And when I say Montgomery, they're just like, oh, where's that? So north of Houston, but I'm excited to be here with you today. This is an interesting topic for me, and I want to be really transparent with you and let you know that when Beth Hayward was putting together the curriculum for the conference, I said I want to talk about bullying because I had just read an article in Higher Ed News where states with legislated mandates were higher education administrators were getting a little distressed about state mandates on bullying. Anybody here from a state that's initiated a higher ed mandate on bullying, any type of bullying education, anything along those lines? Kind of, sort of, yeah. And you know, people were a little nervous with the Tyler Clementi case. They were concerned about what the repercussions of that would be for institutions of higher ed, because as we all know, very often when there's an incident that draws a great deal of public attention, the issue then becomes defined for all of us by that particular incident, many times in the form of legislation. I don't know if that's been a theme at this year's conference, but my colleagues who tend to speak here will often talk about the difficulty of government getting involved in the business of higher ed. And as I read through some of the articles of this concern, I thought to myself, here we go again, because how is this really any different than when the folks in Kentucky had to respond to the state mandate about fire safety education, or when the people in Texas had to write policy and design practice to deal with student travel, or when all of us have recently become embroiled in how are we talking about not just responding to incidents of sexual violence in response to the dear colleague in the OCR letter, or where we were long, long ago when Cleary came out and we scratched our heads and said, what's the point of this and what are we supposed to do besides collect data? And I thought, well, let's spend a little time trying to get ahead of this issue. Because I think oftentimes when we deal with legislative mandates or social issues where we get pressure to respond, we kind of flounder. Or we look around us and we ask what everybody else is doing, or more inappropriately in my mind is we simply do some kind of an educational campaign that says, we're against bullying. Bullying's not welcome on our campus, or stop, don't drink. Or any number of things, and we know those are relatively ineffective. So what I want to offer to you today is a recognition of the complexity of the issue of bullying, and then walk through an approach similar to what Leslie and I talked about in the bystander session, but much more in depth with an acknowledgement of the research and data around college-level bullying at a variety of levels, because it's not just a student-on-student issue. In my initial review of the literature on bullying, I found a lot of variant definitions, and it was interesting to me to look at the complexity of some of those definitions. And you may have your own definition. I know we have folks in the room who actually work on this issue on their campus, but this one really spoke to me because it didn't come from elementary or junior high school literature. It came from a study of adult violence. And so it's interesting in that it mentions prison systems in the definition, not to say that our college campuses are similar to prison systems, but I feel that if we're looking at an adult concept and a definition of an adult concept, we're more likely to see college students and faculty and staff in that than we are with some of the more elementary school, junior high school definitions of bullying. Catherine has, just to give you an FYI, Catherine has loaded the PowerPoint up on the website. I checked with her this morning. I often hold them in case I want to add slides, but it was finalized early and it's been loaded, so you'll all have access to this. By the way, the International Journal of Conflict and Violence, great articles, and really some telling information on a broader sense about school violence if you're interested in that topic. With the complexity of bullying, how I think of it is kind of how this Chinese proverb lays it out for me, that I think of bullying as our tree. And bullying is a symptom of an unhealthy environment. And so how much time have we already spent hacking away at the leaves? We've looked at our cyberbullying policy on campus, and maybe we've issued some kind of a directive through our technology people. Maybe we have done some kind of a social media campaign to let our students know what we expect of them. Some people have already started to integrate messaging about civility, or taken what they're already doing around civility and integrating it into their campus, integrating bullying into that campus messaging. And all of those can be good things, but I think sometimes what that is like the proverb says, it's really just hacking away at the leaves, and we need to step back and take a longer look at the root problem to find out just how unhealthy this tree is and what really needs to change. And is it salvageable? Is it something we can take on? So that's just a philosophical. What this calls for, I think, is we approach the issue of bullying, and I know it's not like yesterday's issue. This didn't come to our attention yesterday. There's a misperception that the Tyler Clementi case is what brought bullying to the forefront, but as I looked into what college campuses were doing with this issue, I found that was not the case. I think what that did is it brought more media attention to the issue. I think that it brought more potentially some questions of legal liability came forward, because not just the criminal charges or civil litigation against the young man who was the perpetrator of the bullying, but people we've been hiding and watching to see what will happen at Rutgers. Is there any culpability there, and what will that mean for us? And oh my gosh, could we be responsible for students bullying, and what would that look like, and how could we possibly manage it? I think that's what the Rutgers case did. But I don't think it really started the national dialogue about bullying on college campuses. I think we've been engaged in that from very varying entry points. And where I would like us to think about as we move forward with this, because there are a number of states with mandates. I am not aware of any federal legislation pending. Some people have intimated that the federal hazing legislation that's being promoted right now may actually encompass bullying in hazing, which will be interesting to me because as someone who is a researcher in the area of hazing and bullying are not the same thing. Some of the behaviors can look the same, but even the researchers in the hazing, Elizabeth Allen and the collaborative have said, please don't take hazing research and lay it right over the top of bullying and assume that it's transferable. We don't know that. A wise researcher said to me, Kim, hazing is a practice of bringing someone in to an organization, and bullying is an exclusionary act of keeping people out of a social circle. So even at a very base level, they're different. But what we really need to do is we need to do a little paradigm shift, and we need to just ask a different set of questions. Instead of saying, what are we going to do about bullying, we need to ask ourselves a deeper question, which is not new to some of you, but is always worth revisiting with a new initiative. What needs to change? What needs to change on the college campus in order for bullying not to be a characteristic of our communities? And think about that, because bullying is a pervasive activity. We think, there's not a lot of data, but when I talk with folks about it, they want to, sometimes it's faculty on faculty. Have any of you met the doctoral student? Leslie hasn't shared this with me. My colleague is in her PhD program. She's yet to tell me about the bullying of a dissertation committee. I don't know if you've appointed your committee or if you're in the selection process, but I hear that from my colleagues frequently, that they're bullied by their dissertation committee. We hear stories of tenured faculty bullying non-tenured faculty. I've been involved in conversation where I was asked to maybe come in and offer not really a peer mediation, but serve as maybe more of an arbitrator in a situation with rookie police officials and more senior police officers in a campus police environment, and the intimation that there was bullying in that space. And then bullying of staff to staff. I shared in a session, I believe yesterday, and I've shared with some folks that I had a recent experience where I watched what I believed to be bullying from senior administrators to junior staff in student affairs. In a meeting environment. So there's a lot of different players involved in it, and so I don't know that we're going to find a simple answer about what do we got to do. It really needs to be more about what needs to change in an environment or in a culture to address this concern. Our traditional approaches, and I trust me, we're going to get into specifics about bullying, but I think this merits some attention, is when we start to tackle issues, whether it's a legislative mandate or an incident occurs on our campus, and we're like, it doesn't have to be a series of incidents. Sometimes it's just an incident that is so shocking to us that we're taken aback that behavior still exists. When I was doing my reading, I found a young man who writes for the University of Tampa, I believe it was, newspaper. And I actually give a citation to him in the slide, and in the slides I'll point that out to you. But he was really intrigued by this concept of bullying on campus because as a college student, he thought really, he just didn't believe bullying continued past the playground and maybe the high school hallway. And he's not a researcher, he's a young journalist, but what he did is he threw the question out to his campus community, and he said, tell me what you think about bullying. Tell me what you think it looks like, tell me what you, and overwhelmingly, ironically, there's a lot of disagreement in the research, just the student voice. This was not a scientifically based research project. There was about 32% of his respondents said that they had witnessed what they believed to be bullying, but only 1% said they'd ever been bullied in college. And then a very significant number of those who responded to his inquiry, which he actually did through Facebook and social media. So we have to, again, I'm not saying this is scientific, but he wanted to get at the college student voice, only one campus, but they were like, oh my gosh, that wouldn't happen in college because we're in a different environment. You're not stuck in the hallways, so the physical environment doesn't really lend itself to bullying. Nobody's waiting in the hallway by your locker, so to speak. They talked about everybody in college has friends because there's so many people that you can always find somebody. That's the beauty of college, no matter how large or small you are, it's just different. And the student perception that maybe bullying didn't happen. And when he posted his article in the comments section, which I found to be really interesting, who commented on his article were students saying, wow, I don't know where you've been, but I've been bullied since the day I entered this campus and I'm now a senior. I've had not only faculty and students, but security guards, as I've walked past, oink like a pig, and talk about the clothing I have on not being large enough for my pig body. This young woman wrote. And then other students continued to do the same thing. And what has happened there, from this young man's perspective, I had emailed him and said, so did your article prompt anything about anti-bullying on your campus? And he said there's some students that are trying to work on an initiative. So think about that as an entry point, just a college student. I share that with you because I think perceptions of bullying vary, but there's a lot of reasons it can come to our attention. It doesn't have to be the death of a student. Nobody has to commit suicide. One particular incident can just be enough to shock us, and it may not be a student saying, I'm going to quit school. I can't put up with this. I can't do this anymore. I'm going to quit school. Could be enough. And what we tend to do when that happens is we jump on the issue, and traditionally when we've addressed these problems, it's an individual group or really a solo person who's charged with taking care of the problem. And if we're talking about a complex, pervasive behavior with all these different players, we can't think of one office or one individual being the driver behind the initiative. We also tend to limit our scope. And I think this happens a lot when I think about the issue of bullying, because are we considering that bullying is not just a student-on-student behavior? And are we also considering that maybe part of the propensity for the challenge of this is that the concept of bullying is maybe a little out of touch with the college student? When I talk to my sons, both out of college and early 30s, and unlike my friend Holiday Hart McKiernan, people are not surprised that I have 30-year-old sons. But when I talked to them about bullying, they were like, bullying? It's a playground term. And our conversation moved to the topic of incivility or disrespect, harassment, physical abuse. So are we limiting our scope? Well, and we have to be cautious of that, because this is not traditional limitations in addressing bullying issues. This is how we tend to limit ourselves when we look at behavioral issues on college campuses. And we fragment by the type of an incident. Is it just going to be a cyberbullying issue? Are we only talking about those extreme situations that maybe deal with bullying based on sexual orientation or race, gender identity? Are we thinking holistically about things like harassment? The difference between an expression of free speech and somebody who's being verbally abusive? How are we thinking about that? And we really haven't done a lot of a needs assessment. We don't spend a lot of time evaluating the problem. And so I want to give you some tips on maybe how we can do that. And I don't know, we do a lot of what everybody else has done. I like this conference because nobody's really up here saying, here's the program, take our program home with you and use it. Oftentimes we're just maybe giving a backstory with an illustration, but we do that a lot. So we look around the country and say, what are you doing about bullying on your campus? I pulled some folks, and they're doing video competitions and getting students to make statements of civility. Some people are using the information from the Ellen DeGeneres show. They've opened up a whole website and just loading up those videos on their campus YouTube feeds and in their campus feeds. Some people have just made buttons. My favorite not initiative to prevent high-risk behavior, the button. The button that has the word bullying with a little red line through it. The button person is rich. I secretly, there's a stock of buttons in an online store for an organization I give a lot of money and time to that say, "Don't haze me, bro." And I'm gonna buy all those buttons that are left and put them somewhere where no one will find them ever again. But those are, I heard this is what they told me, that people talked about social norming campaigns. This percentage of the students feel that respect is a characteristic that you should bring to this college environment with you, et cetera, et cetera. And that's all great. And some of it, hopefully someday, will be evidence-based. But we can't just copy what everybody else is doing. And we can't just think about, what's our activity around bullying going to be? Because really our biggest mistake is we really fail to articulate what's the real problem we're trying to solve. And you may say, well, it's bullying. But we got to go deeper than that, because bullying looks different with different entities. And then we fail to say, okay, we know what the problem is, we know a little more about it, so what do we need to change in our campus structure to help solve that problem? And why do we think what we're doing is actually going to work? How do we envision that what our initiative is actually going to change the behavior? And then ultimately, how do we know if we've accomplished what we're out to achieve? I'm going to slide this in on you because I'm going to let you know super secretly what I'm trying to talk to you about is building your bullying initiatives around the issue of prevention. And that's very simply when we figure out those things that keep people from being bullied, and we try to duplicate those in larger numbers. And we figure out those things that put people at risk of being bullied, or not just victim bullying, not just looking at the victim, but what makes people bullies, and we try to decrease those things. So it's not a new way to think about this, but let's talk about the public health approach as it relates to bullying. Very simple steps that we go through, and ultimately what we know is that an accurate description of any problem is going to give us 90% of our solution. But herein lies the biggest problem with our approach to bullying. This is a theme. This is not a message I just found from the professor at Indiana State University. This is a theme in the research, and I had the good fortune of course, it always happens like the night before you're going to present on a hot topic, of meeting a woman who is very invested in this on her college campus, and she's, I believe, an affirmative action officer at her institution, and is invested in this topic and working on it. And we were talking about the lack of research about college-age students and bullying. She queued me up to some additional research, but what we've really found pretty consistently is we're having a hard time describing this problem because there's not a lot of data. And I know that doesn't mean there's no data. I'm not saying there's no data. There's just not a lot out there that talks about college students. When I looked at the characteristics of what makes a bully, and we'll talk a little bit more about this shortly, the terminology even used in the research was really about very elementary student, junior high student level type of descriptors. Not to say that college students can't have some of those same social issues, but we really we're struggling with this. And so what does that mean? Does that mean, well, okay, Kim, you told us we need to understand the problem, but now you're saying there's not enough research. So is my challenge to go be a researcher? I don't know. I don't think so. If you like to research, go research. I think we need to put a call to the field. If this issue is truthfully a higher education issue and not just a flash in the pan, Rutgers University response, sometimes we get all fired up about a certain type of behavior and then all of a sudden it seems like it went away when it really doesn't go away. Then yeah, we need to call for a little more research, because otherwise we're going to put a lot of money and a lot of time into initiatives that aren't going to really probably do much to prevent bullying on our college campuses. They're not going to help us solve the problem. But the other side of that is, if you're not a researcher and until we get more data, we need to think critically about what we already know about this behavior on our own campus. We need to be able to answer the question before we design an initiative as to what are the behaviors we're talking about. Let's think about that. In the context of bullying, we have cyberbullying. There's actually a little more research on that for college students than there is any other type of bullying. And then there can be harassment. There can be incidents of just basic incivility, illustrations of disrespect. There can be the isms. We can see bullying in the form of expression of the isms, racism, sexism, and any number of those things. So what is the problem? What is it? What behaviors are we specifically talking about? And I don't know how that's different when we think about faculty. And I don't know if somebody has a response to that, but when we think about what are the behaviors that we think about with bullying, when we think about faculty, and how do they look different than student-on-student behaviors? Is it harassment and intimidation, incivility? Are they the same, or are they different? What do you think?
Well, I'm not an expert on the student bullying piece, but for faculty bullying, and it's in meetings, and I strong around power struggle, but it is through this intimidation and just flat out attacking.
So the reports are, from your experience, that it does look very similar. It's intimidation and incivility and abrasiveness, and then verbal attacks on an individual, about them as a person. That's the interesting thing. It's not a rant about an issue, right? We're talking about a verbal attack on an individual, and that makes it different. Yes, sir?
I've seen a sophisticated form of bullying where someone co-opts parliamentary procedure and shared governance processes to continually get her way and silence others in the name of her.
So manipulation is a type of bullying, and in your environment, what you're talking about is the manipulation of the administrative structure so that someone can maintain control of a meeting environment and and really kind of chill everybody else in the room and not allow them to share. And that's how we get our own agenda advanced. And it's very strategic. But manipulation is a behavior that is connected to bullying behaviors with students and I think with faculty, staff. I saw another hand over here, Leslie, and then there was somebody else.
Taking credit for somebody else's work. So, taking credit in terms of publishing, potentially, or within meetings where they'll say their idea versus somebody else's.
Okay. I think that might be an outcome, and I don't know. I'm not going to disagree 100%. An outcome, maybe a manipulative process whereby I commandeer your research and call it my own. I don't know that the simple act of that, of failing to give attribution and academic integrity issues, academic dishonesty, stealing other people's work, is by itself bullying. But I think that there could be bullying that leads up to creating a space where that more easily happens. My colleague that we chatted by the fireplace last night, where is she? Said, we had a really powerful statement. She said, bullying is an overused term. So I think we have to be careful not to refer to certain types of behaviors as bullying that may not be. So I don't know, that may be an outcome, but I'm not sure. Others may have a different thought. I saw another hand then over on the wall. So, okay. Yeah. Exclusionism and isolationism. You're not allowed to be part of this. I just had a visual of the movie Legally Blonde, where Elle had her little muffins and they wouldn't let her sit with the study group. And I think about that because in some of the stuff I read, they talked about law students and the exclusion of law students, the bullying in law school. And I first learned of that when Professor Peter Lake talked to me about the difference between getting a degree at Harvard and getting a degree at Stetson. And it wasn't just the faculty and the academic rigor. It was that if you're in the top 50% at Harvard, you're doing really well. But at Stetson, if you really want that job, you got to be in the top 10% because it's a different type of school. And how bullying became part of the classroom experience in order to manipulate the educational environment to elevate yourself to be in the top percentage of the class. So exclusionism and isolationism in students and maybe in faculty and staff and with researchers and postdoc students. Yes, ma'am.
Kim, I'm just going to follow up on the statement that you made about manipulation. And so this is the example. I was one that said I believe sometimes the word bullying is an overused term, such as maybe a hostile work environment, or uncomfortable, which I also said is oftentimes an overused term. But in terms of manipulation, where you have a faculty member, a senior faculty member, perhaps taking charge and manipulating an agenda for a meeting. And so my question is that bullying or is it unprofessional, disrespectful behavior? And so then I look at other things such as frequency, persistence, and other types of things that might bring something from a disrespectful, unprofessional behavior into a more solid, what I would call bullying type of situation.
And that's exactly where we're going when we talk about the what, because so what our colleague is sharing with us is that, and this is the fireplace chatter, by the way, that's who she is in my world right now, is the concept that an isolated behavior may not be enough to constitute what we might call bullying based on the definition. If you remember the very first one with the complexity that was put up, it was a persistent type of a behavior where an environment is created around it. So it may be an act of incivility or disrespect. So then the question has to be, so is this a pattern of behavior that is continued and used frequently? I'm watching my friend in the back shake his head. Yep, she does it all the time. So then we look at, okay, maybe we're looking not just as an isolated behavior, is that where we're going with this, but maybe the repetitive nature of it and the secondary consequences where people are, they kind of become subservient to that individual, because that's really what we're looking for, is that power play. Is that something that we also have to then go to? Oh yeah, there's a really great book about that issue. Is it a targeted behavior, or is that just who they are? Are they just a jerk? So are they a bully? Are they exhibiting a bully behavior, or are they just a jerk? And that question, I've posed that to other people, and it's like, well, why does it matter if they're a jerk that is a bully? They're still bullying. But then we're talking about a whole different motivation and a whole nother factor. And see how complex this can get? Because then we have to delve down into that, and then we have to be able to identify in our own environments, what behaviors are we talking about, and how much does it happen, and how do we know that, and then who's involved in this? Do we see a propensity, like with the hazing research? We know we have a clear identifier that the most at-risk population for hazing are the newest members of an organization. They're not the only ones victimized by hazing, because there's hazing rituals that take place with members of clubs and teams that are beyond that first year period, but we know they're at risk. Well, who in the bullying culture, who are these? And when we look at the research for elementary, high school age range, we see the weaker person, socially awkward, individuals that there's some intimation that if individuals with certain physical disabilities that may be more subject to bullying. There was nothing in the college research that clearly indicated that. Doesn't mean it's not the case, but who is experiencing this? And then are there any identifiable circumstances that through the trends that you're seeing in your environment, you can go to say, this helps me understand what this looks like on my campus? And if not, then is there anything out in the research? And there is some stuff. Daniel Weddle, who's a professor from the University of Missouri, Kansas City, interestingly enough, was at a large community session at Texas A&M University where faculty, staff, administrators were all brought together in an auditorium to talk about bullying. And I found it interesting to be part of that conversation at one level, but then to see some reaction to it from the campus community. And one young woman said it was like everybody was in this big room waiting for the answer. How will we solve the bullying problem? And like me, he didn't have the direct answer, but what he talked about as an attorney and a law professor who really is invested in this topic is that we do know some stuff. And then general research tells us that bullies, who they are oftentimes they're successful, popular, outgoing people. And there was a time when we thought bullies were those kind of weak and low self-esteem and didn't feel very comfortable with who they were as a person, and so they tried they acted out of that. But what some of the researchers are saying, and in particular Daniel, is that we're not seeing that, and this is specific to college students. That we're not seeing that it's the weaker, socially awkward, this is how I'm going to act out to the world because I'm different, but maybe the more popular. And think about that. I don't know what that looks like in the context of faculty, because I don't know if they're really I don't know how to define a popular faculty member. I know how students define that, and I don't know if they would be the ones who would then take the authority to be the bully. I'm not sure. You have a question? So you may see some similar faculty side of things. And I think it's interesting that these are smart people that some of the research says at the college level, they know exactly who to target. And that's what we have to think about. Is this targeted behavior, or are you just a jerk? What's the answer to that? So if the research tells us this, we get a little bit of an insight as to who may be participating in this. Does that mean that every popular student, the student body president, the IFC president, that really amazing quarterback, that they're a bully? No, but it means that we shouldn't probably spend all of our time thinking about the bully being who we used to think it was, and who the Lifetime TV movies show us they are. Have you ever thought about that? When I was reading through all this, there's so many TV shows about bullying now, and so many, like even the sitcoms have episodes of bullying. I mean, Stewie's been bullied on Family Guy, and there's just been all kinds of it. And when I watch it, it's like, this is not ever who they show the bully to be, Mr. Popular, charismatic, hip guy, when they're really talking about bullying, or the woman who falls into this. Another definition of bullying that I think can also tell us who we should think about when we think about who's involved in bullying comes from some research that was done by, and I'm sorry I didn't put the name of the person. I'll make sure and get that and load that up on the PowerPoint and update it. But I found this in an article that was talking about the bullying effects on college students. It was really an article calling for more research, but the definition they used was that it's a sustained intimidation of a targeted person with this intent to humiliate and frighten. So now we know what the behavior may look like. But this was key to me, the target and the bystanders. So, look at that. Well, this was interesting, because if we have a sense that when we answer the question who, bullying, faculty, staff, students, charismatic, manipulative, positioned in authority potentially, and who could potentially be at risk for bullying, it's not just the target, but it's the environment created around the bystander. And I'm going to draw the really obvious line. So maybe, how are we thinking about bystander intervention as a bullying prevention initiative? Is there some possibility of that if some of the research actually identify that? Another area where we can find out a little bit more about bullying, I think they didn't give it to us in clear-cut form, but in the research, again from the violence and violence prevention literature, is people talk about, the theorists talk about some comparative similarities between domestic violence and bullying. Targeted, creating an environment where the victim becomes subservient, intimidated, and isolated, and any number of things. Not all incidents of domestic violence or domestic abuse look like that, but I thought that was interesting, because maybe if we don't have enough on adult bullying, maybe a place we look to are other forms of violence that the researchers have seen similarities between. See, this is direct. This is researchers saying there's a connection between bullying type behaviors and types of domestic abuse. You are not going to find a solid researcher, people have written this, but I would push back on them, a solid researcher who says hazing and bullying look the same. There's conjecture only. This is so there's a difference. So maybe domestic violence or some of the domestic abuse literature and the characteristics and motivators for that type of behavior will tell us why adults bully or engage in bully type behavior. Did you have a question? I thought I saw a hand over here. Yes, ma'am.
I find it interesting because we have a bullying program at our college. One of the senior instructors who has been close and who's clearly a very intimidating professor, actually stood up and told us that she was bullied as a child, and she knows why she was bullied as a child. I don't know the details, but she said that she was bullied, and she grew up to become this famous, wonderful doctor who had booked out. And when she goes to her class reunion, she can't wait to bully all the people that bullied her as a child. She recognizes the fact that she was bullied, and she bullies her students. And it made me think differently about her, because I thought that she was the most fearful person I've ever met. And so now she, proclaimed that, I said, I understand that. And so I guess people who are bullied when they were young could grow up to be.
And I think that's one of the comparisons, talking about a colleague who shared having been bullied as a child and then sees in themselves the perpetuation of that behavior as an adult, a very successful, charismatic, well thought of adult. And that may be where some of the connection comes from, the repetitiveness. And I didn't find that direct link. It was more about the victimology of the behavior of the domestic abuser and their behavior. But I wonder, that's a big to me. Now, elementary, high school literature, there's some indicators that the bullied become bullies. And then there's others who say, well, I don't know how legitimate that can be when in actuality the characteristics of the bullied are very different from who's a bullier. So there's some question in that, but I think it merits some exploration. And then how would we identify that? You know, that's a trend. I don't know if we could identify it. Well, we can't really do a profile on academic admissions to say, were you bullied? So, but what could we do is we can use maybe social norming and to say, like we've done with high school students that we recognize have drank at a high risk before they come to college, waiting till when they get to college, giving them the same education they got in high school was pretty ineffective. We did it for a long time. Now we say, we know what you think you're supposed to do in college, party like a rock star. But the truth is, on our campus, this percentage of our students don't do that. So maybe that's a place to go, to unnorm that behavior for those in a general population. So I think that's the key with the what's happening. Understanding bullying on your own campus is doing environmental scanning. Where are the reports coming in, and are there any trends in who's involved? And I know not all bullied victims, and I know not all bullying incidents are reported. But if there's nothing there, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist on your campus. But if there's something there, what are the trends? Who's involved in the incidents? Where is it happening? Is it happening in freshman residence halls more predominantly than others? Is it in some areas? Is it happening in specific college environments? Is there a certain place on the campus academically where we find, I had a colleague tell me that the communication college at her campus is where all the bullies were. That's where, when she works in a human resource capacity, and she said, I gotta tell you, either they're just very verbal and very comfortable reporting, or we have a big problem, because that's where a larger percentage of our reports are coming in, of what's going on in a particular college. I don't know what that looks like, but those are the questions you ask. And how often is it occurring? And when it does occur, what specifically does it look like? Because if we can't answer those questions, how can we identify what we need to do about it? We can't just say, oh, this is bullying, and use generic terms that were designed for elementary kids. The secondary thing we have to do after we do that is figure out why does it happen, not just what's happening, but why. And I think this is intriguing in the bullying environment, because what are the risk factors? What make it more likely that bullying will occur? Or asking the question, what are the vulnerability factors? What makes it more likely that I could be bullied, or that individuals could be bullied? Is it a hierarchical structure? Dr. Ann Goodman recently became Dr. Ann Goodman, studied leadership at Texas A&M University. A pretty big mover and shaker in the fraternity and sorority life world, has invested some thought into this. And she was recently quoted in an article as saying that what she believes to be a contributing factor to making people vulnerable to bullying is this overemphasis on hierarchical organizations on our college campuses, that we're so banged up about the hierarchy of student leadership. She works at a large public university where the freshmen are called fish, and that seniors get to wear boots and freshmen don't, and that when you're a sophomore in one particular group, you get to change the color of your belt. It's your hierarchy is actually marked in what you wear. And even at Texas A&M, I think about it, and I love these traditions there. I put 2 boys through that college. I'm happy about that place. But there's like signals that when you're a freshman, you do a certain hand gesture at a football game, and when you're a sophomore, you do a different one, and when you're a junior, it looks different, and you're really only allowed to whoop when you're a senior. And I won't whoop because I don't want my camera guy to freak out at the sound of that on film. But so it's interesting, and Anne intimates that what makes people vulnerable is this perpetuation of the hierarchical environment. Well, what does that look like in the faculty world? Well, tenure track, are we gonna get rid of tenure? Because then we don't have bullying, because nobody can power play? Who's taking that on? Yeah, then we'll do a whole session at the law conference of the legal and carnal fallout of the person who tried to stop tenure at their campus. Wouldn't that be an interesting presentation? But if we know that maybe a hierarchy system makes you more vulnerable, then if we know that going in, what can we do to soften the blow of that system? How can we do more to empower the people that aren't as high up on the hierarchy? If we know it, what can we change? What can we change about it to make it less threatening? And I think there's protective factors. And many of you could probably tell me stories about either yourselves or your children or your neighbor's children or someone who was just that kid who wasn't a bully, but certainly wasn't gonna let him or herself be bullied. and or they were not a bystander to it. I'm sure that there's lots of great stories about that. And I think what we fail to do when we look at high-risk behaviors is we forget that population, the non-bully. Why don't you bully people? You are a charismatic, intelligent, well thought of, socially successful college student. Talk to me about what keeps you from being a bully when those characteristics will be those of some who will become a bully. Have we asked that question? Not every faculty member who has that popularity, or not everybody coming up through tenure, is bullied. So what is it about those environments where it doesn't happen that we could duplicate? We rarely remember to ask that question in any risk behavior environment, because that's what we want to duplicate. I think about that in the context of the work I do with hazing. People will say, do you really think it's possible to find a student organization, particularly a men's social fraternity, that doesn't haze? I'm like, yes. I've met them, and I spend a lot of time with them saying, how do you do this? How'd you make this happen? Because I really would rather spend more time with them figuring that out than spending time with the hazer who's going to tell me why they think it's a good idea. My success will come from the people who don't. So that's really the route we need to take. And again, the research tells us a little bit. Researchers have found that children, this is children's research, who bullied are really maybe oftentimes want to increase their popularity. Now, and that it's interesting that young men want other young men to think well of them, so they'll bully in a similar gender environment. And mean girls will be mean to girls because it's not about what the boys think of them. It's really about what their popularity is with other girls. I know mean girls exist on college campuses. I know that. But I think they look a little bit different. But the social credibility is what will drive us, is a motivator when we ask the question, why? Well, how can that inform what we need to do in response to bullying? Well, maybe we need to have some kind of a community definition of what it means to be socially cool. And maybe we need to do some kind of education on not just civility, but how everyone should be treated with unconditional positive regard in our community, because we are all part of the same family. I think that's what William and Mary's message about once you come to their campus, you're where you're supposed to be. I think that's part of their messaging, is that you're all welcome and we're all great people. We just have different qualities. I don't know. But we also know from some of the research that really liminal stuff, that fear of people who are different than us can drive bullying. I see something that I'm fearful of. I've worked in not counseling environments, but in conduct environments with students who have committed acts of racial or sexual orientation insensitivity. They've been racist or homophobic in action or word or whatever, and I've talked with them, and I often would find a fear-driven motivation for that. Very often when I dealt with young college men who were engaged in behaviors that we wanted to talk with them about that were homophobic in nature, they would talk to me about never having had the experience of being in such a close proximity to someone who was gay. That their only real connection or understanding of other men who were identified as gay was what they had seen on television, or what they had been told in stories from their peers who were just like them and hadn't really ever and had an opportunity. And so they were expressed ultimately some level of not just misunderstanding, but a little afraid of this difference. And that's why they pushed away by being a bully. That personal experience, but in the research they talk about that could be a motivator. I thought this was an interesting thing for us for answering the question why. And this, I felt silly when I read it because I should have known. Organizational membership can be a motivator for bullying. That if there's competition amongst different types of organizations on your campus, that can be a setup for an expectation, not just that we're going to be jerks to each other, but that we will exhibit bullying behavior. So I'm going to pick on the Panhellenic sororities. Don't be surprised that Panhellenic sororities can be bullies. We like to sometimes present that our Panhellenic sorority women are just kumbaya and we're beautiful and we're pretty and we love everybody and we get good grades, and that's just not the truth. A lot of the women are awesome, but there's also a perpetuation of mean girl behavior. So if you're a member of, for those of you not fraternity and sorority minded, I apologize, but if you're a member of I'll pick on my own organization, Delta Gamma, And if you're a Delta Gamma on a certain campus and all Delta Gammas hate the Thetas, which my colleague Leslie's a Theta, so I'll pick on her chapter, then what they talked about in a few of the articles was how that can perpetuate kind of this expectation that if you're going to be a Delta Gamma, you are not going to be nice to the Thetas. And that's not just going to look like ignoring them, it's going to look like intimidation, harassment, talking bad about them, finding the weakest amongst them and just being vicious with that individual. It's the whole concept of hunting the herd. You know, we're not going to go pick on the most popular, strong-spirited, extremely confident president of the Theta chapter, but I'm going to find those new women in her organization that are already a little timid and maybe freaked out about being new in a organizational culture, and I'm going to just lay it on them hard. And when I read that, I was like, oh my gosh, I've seen that happen. So how does knowing if the motivation can be organizational dynamics and competition amongst organizations, then ultimately that gives us another entry point to talk about bullying on our college campuses. And what that tells me is that, well, we spend an awful lot of time trying to target our programs, our initiatives at individuals. That's what our conduct processes can do. You know, they look at individual behavior. We may be looking at, when you look at what you're doing around bullying, maybe what you're looking at is what your policy says or what it doesn't say, and how is the policy different from in a cyberbullying environment, between that and a bullying environment. Whatever you do along those lines, please, please, please work with your university attorney, because I think the really scary dark cavern that sits in front of us when we work with bullying is venturing into that kind of maybe some of that speech stuff. You know, the hate speech. Remember when we were all like banged up about hate speech and we just weren't going to have it anymore, and we started to write speech codes? And then what happened? Organizations formed, like the group FIRE, and they went public letting people know how we had no respect for the United States Constitution. And then when people started getting taken to court. So if we're looking at addressing individual behavior through policy as you draft policy, I know we don't usually draft policy without insight of our legal counsel, but let's make sure it's legally sound policy. But ultimately, we really can't just focus on the individuals, because the truth of the matter is behavior, and no matter what behavior, is a function of a person in their environment. So what I'm trying to advocate to you is to not just look at the people and change them, but think about how can we make the biggest impact on the environments that we work in to maybe mitigate these acts that we call bullying. Over information, but if you have an interest in learning more about this, it really applies to using the socio-ecological model of change in high-risk behavior, which says we have individual behaviors that we can look at and contributors. That's knowing the characteristics of the bully. Probably can't change the characteristics of a person, but knowing that might help us know who to target to talk to. Interpersonal, how groups dynamics are, how groups interact with each other, those kinds of motivators. But then we also have to be able to look at institutionally, how does our campus environment contribute to this problem? Community, is there something about the community in which our campus resides that can add to this problem or maybe create a protective factor around the issue? And then socially, out in society, what's going on out there that informs this behavior? Is it of bullying and or bullying type behaviors? And really, the biggest change is going to happen in those areas where the blue is. And we have to ask questions about what do we have the capacity to change, and then how do we create something that will interrupt this behavior. And this is where we kind of get into the strategies and activities, but before we jump there, I want to make sure that I'm going to kind of go back in the map and retrace our steps. So here's where we are. We are in a position nationally in higher education, some of us by state mandate, maybe some of us just by campus experience, that we are wrestling with what we're going to do about this bullying type behavior. Some of us might have been engaged in that conversation 25 years ago, but not many. We're fearful of state legislation and state mandates, not fearful, not terrified in our work, but fearful that we won't really know how to comply. But at the end of the day, we know we need to do something about the issue. This is not new territory for us. We had to do something about high-risk drinking. We have to do something about sexual violence. We have to do something about prescription drug sharing. We have to do something about hazing. There's behaviors. This is not new territory for us. So let's not jump and knee-jerk react. Let's strategically think through What does this look like? What does bullying look like? And is it really even bullying? Is that the right term on a college campus? For some, you may say, well, yes, but I don't know. I think at the college level, bullying seems to be a term that students don't connect with. And I actually have a colleague who has offered to help me do a very simple inquiry around that issue. To say, ask students, do you connect with this terminology in a way that a researcher would ask that question? Because I think really what we're talking about is the issue of civility and respect and dignity and safety. Because bullying can go to a very physical level. So it's physical safety. And if that's really what we're talking about, then could we make that our terminology? And say, okay, what do those things look like? What do acts of incivility look like? And maybe not every act of incivility may be bullying, but if we know it's a type of bullying, then is it going to hurt us to stop independent acts of incivility? Maybe they're not ongoing and pervasive. Maybe they're not, and maybe they're just an isolated act of harassment or intimidation. Maybe it's not bullying, but if we use the right terminology for the college student and we look at what those behaviors look like, we're going to have a better idea of where we need to attack. And we have to ask the question, why does this happen? And anecdotally, I bet everybody here has a thought in their head about why people are bullies. Maybe they were bullied growing up. Maybe you were bullied and you have your own opinion about why those people were mean to you. I used to think people were bullies because they were rich and we were poor. I thought money was the predeterminant to being a bully because I was bullied in a socioeconomic environment. And we were not poverty level. We just had too many kids and not enough income. And there's a point at which it's really not cool to wear the hand-me-downs when everybody older than you is a boy. And I'd outgrow that. And I think sometimes I still transcend back into it and then realize, oh, wait a minute, I'm not a 24-year-old fraternity man. I'm a 49-year-old mother of two and I need to dress like a woman. But I revert back, right? And when I got bullied and it was pervasive and it was mean and it was hurtful and it intimidated me, it was always about my how I was dressed, with a follow-up to how I dressed poor, with a follow-up to how I dressed poor because my dad was a truck driver, so I just assumed people bullied because they were rich. Well, I know that's not true. But so we all have an opinion. So if I were to take that attitude or that belief, that anecdotal belief, into work, if I was on a campus, what would that look like? Well, would I be creating some kind of a socioeconomically based educational curriculum? And how much time would I waste doing that? So we can't just bring our own attitudes about this into the room. We have to look at what little research there is and try to figure out why people engage. And if we don't have enough research, when you deal with an incident of bullying, ask, what made you think this was okay? Most powerful question a university staffer can ask a person accused of inappropriate behavior. You will get more information out of that question than, why'd you do it? I don't know, I was drunk. Okay, what made you think this was okay? Different question. And when you get the answer, maybe that's where we start to gather the data. And then we can start thinking about our strategies, what needs to change, and then the activities that we can do to start addressing bullying. First thing to do is, before you jump into creating an initiative, what's already happening? You have a really fully developed campaign around civility at your university, is that right? My fireplace friend, Mary, is it Mary? Mary? Yeah. So you have and it's based on the concepts of civility. And so there's an initiative already that's happening. So as Mary embarked into this conversation around bullying, she didn't have to reinvent anything. Or maybe you chose to call it civility from the get-go because it already exists. What already exists on your campus that may relate to this? Can you think of other things? There's a civility initiative. What other types of initiatives might be going on that we could attach this kind of anti-bullying message to, or this bullying prevention initiative to? Can we think of others? Yes, ma'am. Safe zone training? I love that because one of the things I saw at Jacksonville State in the beautiful Alabama, a great state where everything is fried, and if it hasn't been fried yet, you will find it fried. You can't ask them to fry it, and they'll do it for you. It was awesome, visit there. Their Safe Zone, they've expanded. Historically, Safe Zone has been really about sexual orientation or gender identity, and it's a safe space. You know, I'm sure many of your campuses have those. Ironically, in a political environment, and they've shared this very publicly and given me permission to share it, in a political environment where the administration wasn't sure if everyone would be happy giving money to helping out the gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgendered students, imagine that in today's day in the South, a little surprised, they said, well, then we won't just make our Safe Zone about that, because really we need more. So they have developed their Safe Zone to be around a number of different issues, and variant members of the Safe Zone team have a little more expertise in different types of behaviors. Some are really learning how to deal with victims of hazing or perpetrators of hazing at a deeper level. So it's interesting. So I love that, and expanding your Safe Zone. What other types of initiatives? Campus civility initiatives, Safe Zone, anything else you can think of that's cooking? Yes, ma'am. Workplace violence initiatives. Conversations about workplace violence have been going on for quite some time. And every time we have an incident of high-profile workplace violence, we kind of have the door flies wide open and we can talk more about it. Anything else that we can think of? Suicide prevention initiatives. That's, you know, we invested in those, and I think we continue to invest at those at high levels, as we should. Thank heavens we've learned more about them. That was a classic not do a strategic thinking process when we designed response. When Elizabeth Shin was set herself on fire in the residence hall community at MIT and shocked the nation. And in such a violent, I mean, suicide's a violent thing, and it is, but in such a graphic way, she took her life, right? And we as a nation were like, oh my gosh. And then we were waiting. People were writing. Gary Pavella, like, he spent a lot of ink on that one. Gary was like so deeply invested in that, and we're lucky that he was. But what happened in that environment was we all waited for the courts to tell us what MIT should have done. And they settled. So what did we not get? Oh, we didn't get anything telling us what the courts, we never heard what the court said MIT should have done. But we reacted because there was this initiative. There wasn't really state mandates, but we were getting directives from our college administrators, and some schools went a little off the charts, and it became, if you had a suicidal ideation, you were interimly suspended from school pending an inquiry into your mental stability to be a student. Oh, so you've intimated that you might take your life, and our solution will be that we will interimly kick you out of school. Or if you've actualized an act, not fully completed, of course, because that would be illogical, but you've made an attempt, then we're going to suspend you, because we can't take the risk of you, because we don't know what our legal liability is for you. So we're going to just do this. We're going to just get rid of you. And that happened all over the country. We reacted really inappropriately to that too quickly, because we didn't step back. And now we have much more so. And many schools didn't all react inappropriately, but when people step through this prevention approach to look at suicide, campus suicides, Paul Jaffe and other people have done great stuff for us. So maybe a suicide prevention initiative, because one of the connectors in the literature is the outcome of bullying can be suicide, as we saw at Rutgers. So it's asking that critical question, what else is going on, and how can we connect to that, and what could we learn from those initiatives to inform us about this behavior on our campus? And then it's asking about what messages are already being generated around the issue of bullying. Just because you don't have a campus-wide initiative doesn't mean somebody's not already talking about that. You know that, right? There's a very high probability that somebody who's very passionate about this is lecturing some population of students somewhere on your campus about the issue. And let's find out what that message is. Not to shut it down, but to either capitalize on it if they can say, oh, you know what, this has actually helped us in this. I recognize that in a specific class, a very competitive coursework, et cetera, maybe a faculty member said, I recognize bullying was pervasive because it was a cross-generational class where you had people from senior level and freshman level in the same coursework. I don't know if that exists. I think it does. So I talk about bullying and civility and respect in the classroom and amongst each other as students, and I've seen positive outcomes. Find out and say, well, let's talk about your message. But what's already happening on this issue? Are your residence life staff talking about this with new incoming students? Is it part of the floor meeting? You ever go to the floor meetings? Who's worked in residential life? Brave souls work in residential life. But the floor meeting, there's so much stuff that we say, tell them this at the floor meeting. And then if we have 30 RAs, resident assistants, which we call them resident assistants and we call them we like to rename stuff in residential life. We do that a lot. The org chart doesn't change by name, just title. But resident assistants pretty generic. If you have 30 resident assistants, the probability is you're getting 17 different messages in the floor meeting. Because, and that doesn't mean that it's all bad. I'm not talking style, but we have to think about that. How do we manage the message? What's already going on and how can we capitalize on that or manage the message? What's the current response mechanism to bullying? Is it overzealousness? Is it if I call it bullying, that makes it bullying, so you have to respond to it like bullying? Or is there a sequential process where someone's trained enough to know what questions to ask? Mary knows to say, well, was this an isolated incident? Were you targeted? Is it a perpetual behavior? What else is going on with it? Let me get a little more information from you, because we're so quick to just say I'm being bullied. So how are you responding to it? What is the response process for cyberbullying? If a student cyberbullies, I've just recently, bullying on Twitter, at least you only have 140 characters to bully. Maybe you don't get to bully as intentionally as you can on Facebook. But Twitter bullying, I encountered that at a school I was just at, had a group sit down with me, and it was a clear case of a young woman had chosen to leave her student organization, her sorority. It was not a Panhellenic sorority, it was a culturally based group. She had chosen to leave because of a number of different reasons. She had been a member for a year. She wasn't hazed or anything. She wasn't seeing herself in the experience anymore. And so her sisters, who told her they unconditionally loved her and that it was a lifelong connection forever and ever, no matter what, bullied her. She was getting, nobody wants you on this campus anymore, you should leave, your residence hall room is too close to the rest of us, since you're not part of us anymore, could you get out? We better never see you wearing the colors of our organization in public, or we'll rip those clothes. So physical threats and intimidation, nasty notes on her whiteboard on her door. When she took the whiteboard down, then they just wrote on the door. It didn't matter. Any number of things. I had a colleague who said, well, one of the things we've done to deal with some of this insensitivity and civility is we took all the whiteboards off the residence hall doors that we paid lots of money to put up 3 years ago, because we thought it was a great way for community messaging. And I was like, well, look out, because at least the whiteboard you can pull off or wipe off, but now they'll just start painting the door if you really have a problem. You know, so she went through all of those behaviors, and it was, you know, what was the response supposed to be? And the campus I was working with at a campus level, the national organization wanted insight, what they should be doing, said, you know, really, isn't that free speech? Because it's Twitter, and if students tell us it's free speech, or, you know, people say, oh, free speech. No, I don't know that it is. I think it's harassing. She felt intimidated. She had started to isolate and not go to certain classes because members of that organization were in those classes. There were some typical characteristics. So what's your response when those things happen? And do you only respond if you can use the code of conduct? If you heard nothing else from me at this conference, what I would want you to know, because somehow everyone in this room has some capacity to influence your university's discipline process, either for faculty, staff, or students. I don't care what your role you play when you're here. Just because it's not a code violation doesn't mean the behavior can't be discussed. Just because we can't run them through a process that's formal doesn't mean we can't have a conversation. What's happening with that? And then where are there opportunities to maybe intervene in your community? So doing kind of an audit of what's already happening before you develop your strategy, which is the conversation about what needs to change. A really interesting thing to do is to figure out where those opportunities lie. Are there certain communities on campus that we have the greater potential to have an impact on? Is it, if we're going to talk to the bystanders to bullying, who would those people be? Do we do the initiative to the tenured faculty and tell them to stop being bullies? Or do we prepare our non-tenured faculty to be bullied and empower them with not standing up for themselves, not victim blaming? We can't say to people who have a potential, it's like the new students in an organization when we say don't allow yourself to be hazed. Okay, not always a bad message, but not a very productive message. So who are we going to, where are our best opportunities for people and places? Are there opportunities where we might have missed a chance to intervene? I think about this when I think about, and maybe too literal, I've spent way too much time this semester with the fraternity world. Not the only world I hang out in, but it has been fraternal this fall. Excuse me. Greek week, or weeks of competition. Homecoming sometimes is a competitive week on a college campus. Sometimes you just got to know when you need a drink. You know, and I think about this, organizations that are competitive against each other, and that bullying can come out of that. Are we creating competitions amongst our student clubs and organizations? And before those begin, not to say we get rid of all competition, but is that a chance for us to have this conversation about respect and dignity and civility? You know, it can be a bloodbath on the sport field. Go out there in intramurals and just play your heart out. But that doesn't mean that we have to be abrasive, abusive, or uncivil to each other. I don't know, is there an intervention opportunity somewhere there, and where does it lie? Where are those positive attitudes? And that's really like finding those people who just wouldn't accept this. And you probably know some of those individuals. You know, if tenured faculty are a targeted audience, who will they listen to? Maybe if peer education is an accurate model, maybe other tenured faculty. Are there tenured faculty that you know would want to get engaged in this and would want to say, this is why this is a bad behavior, and here's the consequence of us being bullies in our position, and really what we should be as mentors, and we should exhibit mutual respect to each other? You know, who are those advocates for what we're trying to accomplish? You know, what is the misinformation that's out there? You know, how can we correct misinformation? Just any number of different things, but it's looking for opportunities, literally opportunities to make change, and then clearly defining what it is we're trying to accomplish. I'm not going to bore you with the learning outcomes, but if really what we're going to do is going to have some potential for change, let's at least be able to articulate the purpose of what we're doing. I want to increase the concept, I want to increase the recognition of civility in our community. I want to increase the celebration of unconditional positive regard and mutual respect. I want to decrease these specific behaviors in this population. What is it that your initiative is supposed to help you do? Because then you'll know that you've spent the right amount of time before you get around to designing the activity, which I know we are not the activity people. This conference does not draw the programmer of the campus, but we, even as attorneys and senior administrators, and the roles that we play that come to this conference, and faculty professionals, we are all about the activity when we have a problem. We have a problem. Let's design a program. We have an issue. Let's make a t-shirt. My favorite t-shirt was, we had a report that came from the president's office to student affairs when I was at Arizona State University that there was a grave concern that the violence amongst young men on our campus was just peaking, and it was volatile, and it was very, we needed to do something about it. So what a question we start our meeting out with, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do about this violence? Because the president got called, and when the president's office gets calls and then he calls the vice president, we all know what we do, right? We just jump. So they said, here, create a task force. We're going to put the person in charge of alcohol, other drug and violence prevention in charge. So we at least tagged the right person to run the meeting. And we got together and we were talking, and I went to the first initiative, and then I sent one of my staff in, and she was like the innovative, creative prevention specialist in the office. She came back from the third meeting and she was so angry, and I was like, what's up? And she said, we're making t-shirts. And they're going to have like a person's hand up that had like a peace sign, and it was graphically amazing and a beautiful blend of the most obnoxious gold that no one any paler than this podium should wear that shirt at Arizona State because it just looks bad on you. And maroon, beautifully graphic, and it just said, resolve conflict peacefully. And she said, we're going to make shirts, and we're going to make posters, and we're going to make yard signs. And I said, well, talk to me about why you're so frustrated. She said, because we're spending all $5,000 we got for this initiative on shirts and yard signs and posters. Because it was problem, VP said act, do something. Oh, we did something, we made a shirt. So I said, well, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Maybe this will speak to people. So she took the graphic out on campus. She talked to students. She said, when you see this, what do you think? And they did not get the message. That's the going right to the activity. Ironically, I'll tell you what happened when we did the problem analysis. When we went back and slowed down and said, What's really going on here? We found out that there had been a young man who was intoxicated and got into an altercation after a football game and lost the vision in one of his eyes. And his dad was angry and called the president. And how that translated down was incidents of violence amongst men is on the rise and we need to do something about it. The police chief actually shared when we picked up the phone and called someone who might know about incidents of violence that there was a decrease in those reports and he was more concerned about the violence of women against women. But we went right from the problem, never stopped to ask a question about it, and created an activity. And the activity piece, the action, and I'm not talking just student activities, kumbaya programming, it's whatever we do, whatever program we're gonna do or initiative we're gonna create. Program's a generic term for me. It's not, that doesn't mean people in a room, needs to be developed with some intentionality. And we need to know that when dealing with behaviors that have a violent tendency to them or can be humiliating, degrading, or isolating, because bullying's not the only one that has those characteristics, here's the connection to hazing. Hazing has similar outcome characteristics. It's just the motivation for it is different than the motivation for bullying. We know that if we think about it critically and we're comprehensive in our approach, we don't just have one initiative. It's planned, it's strategically thought about. We make sure we have the infrastructure to support it. And that doesn't just mean money. That means we can't put a civility initiative out on our campus if our campus does not have a commitment to civility. It's kind of like developing a leadership initiative where your community doesn't want to be defined as leaders. That's not their goal. They wanted to be defined as the top party school in the country. That's a good enough characteristic for them. So you have to think about what's the infrastructure going to support. And then you have to decide what it is you want this bullying program to accomplish for you, because we have to own it. Sometimes all we really want is a reaction. That means we want bodies to show up, and we want to be able to say we got the message out to people. And if that's what we want, did they like it? You've seen that assessment, right? We do this with faculty, not just students. We bring in somebody, a training, we do education, we do some initiative, and then all we really care about is if we had bodies in the room. That's that old, how do you know that was successful? We had 730 students come. 85% of them were on their phones the majority of the time, or studying in a textbook, but they were in the room, or yeah, they really liked it. They thought the speaker was pretty funny. Got a reaction. They showed up and they liked it. And if that's all you need, then develop your program at a level that's your outcome. But maybe what you want is a little learning to occur. You'd like to see some short-term knowledge. You'd like to be able to know that if you queued up some questions about civility or dignity or bullying, whatever terminology you use, after whatever your initiative is, whether it's a marketing campaign, a social norming initiative, whatever it is, that people would have actually learned something. They might not have been entertained. They might not have been entertained by the presenter, but they learned something. And they might not have even really liked the program because it was at 2 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. And what are we doing? I used to have staff that would be, are you kidding me? We should know staff meetings on Fridays. I'm like, that's not an option in our world. Sometimes we need to pull the staff together. So no matter what we accomplished in a staff meeting on a Friday, at least 50% of the people who worked for me at the time would, if I evaluated them, would have said they didn't like it. But I would hope to think that if I said, did you learn anything, they might have learned something. So what is it that we want to get out of it? Do we want to see that people can demonstrate some skill? And think about this in the concept of if we were to blend the two presentations from yesterday and today, if we were going to develop a bystander initiative and try to use that. Leslie, you're doing this at IU in a big comprehensive way. So maybe one of your goals is bullying behavior would be addressed as well by your students. You didn't name that in your initiative, but it's comprehensive in nature. So, maybe they could show some of the skill for confronting another bully. Because one little very small, I think they only assessed 1,027 students at Tulane University, some researchers, and I couldn't really gather if they were graduate student researchers or faculty, but it really doesn't matter. But they said in their little study, they found that 29% of the people had seen bullying. So, well, maybe then the people who are standing there seeing it, we could train them. What do we want them to know? We want them to be able to learn something. Maybe what we'd like to do is to see some other effect, and we'd actually like to shift behavior. You know, are they making better decisions? Are we seeing a decline in this? Are we getting indicators that the concept of civility is being more elevated? Or maybe what we're looking for is significant culture change, and that's where we want to see some long-term benefits, where we see fewer consequences of this behavior, whatever it is. You got to answer that question before you design your initiative, because that will tell you how to design your initiative. Do you understand that? I mean, that's not, I sometimes go, why do I teach this part? And it's because we develop curriculums, whether we're writing a new policy, there's some curriculum aspect to that. We create educational initiatives, we design response protocols, oftentimes without really understanding what the end goal is. Or we'll say, classic example, what if we created a civility statement that we are a community of respect, and as such, we will treat each other with dignity and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we asked all the faculty in the department to sign it. And we said, what is the purpose of that? Well, because we know acts of incivility occur amongst our faculty, and we're hoping this will be their commitment to not do that. Is it bad to put that in front of our faculty and have them sign it? Is that a bad initiative? Is that going to harm us in some way? I don't know. I don't really know if it's going to hurt us. But I'm not really sure it's going to change their behavior so they're going to be more civil to each other. I think about that in the context, we like to have students sign policies sometimes. Hazing's a big one. We'll have them sign the hazing policy. And when I ask people, why do we do this? They'll say, so they won't haze. And then I say, oh, the research indicates that the reason they haze is they don't know it's against the rules. And then they go, well, no. And I'm like, okay, so why are they signing it? I would never advocate you not have them sign it, because I've been in the lawsuit before. Kappa Alpha Order, Texas A&M. It wasn't against the university. It was, it wasn't Alton. It was young man, first name was John, was against Kappa Alpha Order. And in the suit, the officers of the organization abdicated responsibility back to the national fraternity by saying they were never made aware that Kappa Alpha Order had a hazing policy. So it was kind of nice for Larry Weiss and his attorney to trump out the document they had signed. And then it was nicer when we trumped out the Texas A&M one right behind it. So it was a good CYA. But I don't know that it made them, well, obviously it didn't make them not haze. So it's thinking more critically about what it is we're trying to accomplish with what we're doing, and keeping in mind some of those principles of adult learning and adult education, that we can't just make people aware of bullying or acts of incivility or harassment, because just making them aware won't change their behavior. We need to understand that we can't use scare tactics. We can't just talk about the students who will kill themselves if they're bullied. Because if we do that, we don't have any long-term change. Just so you know, this isn't just in college age. Scare tactic education is never, there's a really intimate science behind how you make it work, and it's so complex most people have never pulled it off. So we can't do that. We can't threaten people with the number of students who will leave or made up stories, but so we have to think critically about it. An interesting thing that I don't know if this would come out in the bullying, and I haven't seen any initiatives that are using it. Dan Rona, Rise Partnership, who's an adult education theorist and has a specialization in curriculum design, coupled with some public health folks, have found this research recently where they're studying the impact of myth and fact education, where we put the myth out in front of people and then we give them the facts. Do you know what people retain? The myth. So why do we even have to give them the myth? Why don't we just give them the facts? Why do we have to talk about what we don't want them to do? Why don't we just put out the message of the positive environment, treat each other with respect, be civil, that everyone deserves this, and if you don't feel that's what you're getting, we're here to support you, whatever the positive message is. We can't do a one time a year during freshman orientation, talk to all the freshmen about not allowing themselves to be bullied. We can't do that with our new faculty during faculty orientation. We have to do a little bit more than that. We also have to think about this not becoming a just-in-time educational initiative, because I don't think we're going to change this behavior. It's a pervasive behavior in our society. I don't need a lot of research to tell me that bullying is happening on college campuses, and I don't think you need a lot of research to believe that. We just need more research to tell us what it looks like better at a college level so we can understand it. But I don't think anybody's really going to say it's not happening at all, and I think if it's happening even in the smallest amount, it's too much. So what we tend to do sometimes with that kind of behavior is we do what is called just in case education. It's symbolized to me by the full glass. Just in case we never get to talk to you about this again, we're going to tell you absolutely everything there is to know about it in this very short period of time, and then you're going to retain all that and go off into the world. Okay, great. This is called freshman orientation on some college campuses. We're going to give you every piece of information about how to be a successful student 2 months before you ever get to campus, when you're really trying to spend your time avoiding your mom, who's picking up every single pamphlet and putting it in the bag. 2 copies, because they told her to, so you would have one and she would have one, and you're just mortified that she's wearing that name your college mom shirt and her mom jeans, and you just want to get away from her. But in that time frame, we're going to teach you everything there is to know about being a student on our campus. We're going to fill that glass up, because we may never see you again. We can't do that with these types of initiatives. We need to think critically as we design and do stuff just in time. Think about those entry points. If a person is entering into a dissertation environment and there is some legitimacy to there being bullying in that culture, then how do we integrate that into those first phases of you starting that process? How do we have a conversation? Do we queue up some way to evaluate your committee to determine if you have in fact picked a bully? I don't know. Because if the bully's tenured, they're probably not going anywhere. So what do we, I don't know. I don't know what that looks like. But I think there's possibility that we could ask the question and design it. We just got to shift the paradigm. Not what are we going to do about bullying, but what needs to change, and think about what we're already doing, and you can kind of walk through, go home. If you have an initiative, just ask yourself, what are we doing? What are we thinking this is doing to impact this behavior of bullying? What are we trying to change with it? What makes us think this will work? And then decide, have you got it right, or do you need to rethink it a little more intentionally to develop something that will have a capacity to really bring about change? I don't know what the direct answer is. I think that more research will come. I think whatever we can do around the issue of civility is effective. I think peer educators have a play in this. I do think, Leslie, the bystander stuff that like you're engaged in, I think there's something there, because if victims of bullying don't have that, if they're truthfully described the way that I found them in the literature, and you that have done more work in this area than probably me know, if they may not have the capacity to stand up for themselves. And we've seen that played out without going to an extreme, potentially. Then maybe what we need is the bystander person to step in and to say, or how could that person have an impact on that? If social credibility is so critically important to the bully, how could we show them that being a bully actually decreases your social credibility and doesn't increase it? And let's not say that if it's not true, because nothing's worse than to say, people don't really like bullies. So when you think you're cool because you bully, or you're a mean girl, you're really not. If there is, in fact, a culture and an environment where they are embraced and elevated and given privilege, then let's deal with that first. There's just any number of things that we can do around it. And civility, I think, is the place to start. But wherever you start, make sure you do a very thoughtful process, because we don't want to get to where we've gotten sometimes with our other behaviors. Thoughts from the experts in the room on the issue, or questions or concerns before we send you off either to downtown Burlington to buy your very hip Vermont shoes, which are the best shoes in the country, or downtown Vermont, or your Baskin Robbins. Anybody have a question before you head out? Concerns? Yes, ma'am. Yes.
I work in a public institution which is unionized faculty. And what we were trying to come up with, just as you're saying, is service standards or civility standards and stuff. The union attorney was saying, well, block that. We know that a lot of bullies operate covertly, and we know that oftentimes it's an opinion or a perception that someone has that someone's not being civil. It might not be that out there. And so what's the sanction? What's the sanction? So when you mentioned, can we have people sign these civility statements? In a unionized environment, they were saying no. What's the sanction? They have contractual obligations.
because, and I'm doing this as much for our folks who may watch this later to repeat, is that in a union environment, having someone signed a principled statement of civility, the union people are saying, well, okay, that's kind of a contract, so if they don't follow through, what's the consequence? So what happens if they don't do this? Or integrating it into appointment letters about being a community that is mutually respectful, et cetera. Again, the question becoming from the union representatives, so what? If they don't do that, what's gonna happen to them? So what that would mean is that slowing down in your environment is that, okay, that's not the place that we can implement this, or if we are, we have to come up with a set of acceptable consequences that can meet whatever union standard there may be, but that can actually be enforced. So see how that can be a critical thing about thinking through intentionally what it is you're designing, because you can have a backlash of consequence, which is what I saw with the hate speech stuff several years ago. People just shot from the hip, and then bam, we were in court. So you may not be in court, but you'll have a union rep knocking on your door, which can be of consequence. So it's good to be aware of other barriers. Anything else? Thoughts, closing comments from our colleagues in the room? It's always beautiful to come to Burlington, Vermont, and to spend time with people here, and I always learn. Over on the whiteboard over here is the URL for the evaluation. Beth Hayward has asked that I please ask you to spend a little time on that, not just from program content. We really do go back and read all the evaluations and try to use that information to our best to get the right speakers in the room and the right topics in the room. But as this was our first year in the Davis Center, we really need your thoughts. If not on anything else, we need your thoughts on the logistics. And if we don't ask the right question for you, then just give us a little qualitative data. We really ultimately need that. And just because, don't be a bystander to this, just because you think everybody has to know how crappy the shuttle system was, don't assume that we do, so put it in writing, okay? That's what we really need on the evaluation. Travel safe, we'll see you next year, and let's stay in touch with each other. Thank you.